On this week's 51%, we speak with investment strategist and coach Ange Matthews for her thoughts on how women can achieve financial independence and have their money work for them.
Folks would talk about becoming debt-free, budgeting all the time just to save. And what I thought about was, this can't be all on me.
We also learn about the life and legacy of the late philanthropist Joan K. Davidson and how her work helped shape New York City and New York's Hudson Valley. I'm Jesse King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jesse King. We've hosted a lot of interviews with women in business and financial advisors over the years, discussing how you can build a budget and start saving for retirement or whatever your goals might be. But today we're focusing specifically on investing, on getting into the stock game and ditching the mental image of Wall Street being for and about guys in suits. Our main guest today is investment strategist and coach Ange Matthews, founder of the crash course Happy Investor Method. Matthews is a self-taught, first-generation investor and mother of two, who actually grew up thinking she'd be a philosopher. But after graduating college, she switched gears and landed a job at Goldman Sachs. 10 years later, Matthews says she is now a seven-figure investor, and her work has allowed her to take care of her parents, pay for her wedding, go on vacation, and buy her first home. Her goal with the Happy Investor Method, she says, is to educate people about investing of all types. We should point out here that Matthews considers herself an investment educator, not an advisor, so any companies she mentions here should be taken as examples and hypotheticals and not endorsements. She's particularly interested in working with women and people of color and ditching the concept that you have to be rich to be successful. Matthews says when she started out, she was making $40,000 a year and was six figures in debt.
Typically speaking, folks would talk about becoming debt-free and budgeting all the time just to save. And what I thought about was, this can't be all on me. It just can't. I need something else to make my money work when I'm out still having a good time, when I'm out trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, when I'm out taking care of my parents or trying to study and dive deeper into philosophy. And so I thought to myself, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to replace that part of who I am, the part that's committed to making money, the hustle, the drive. And that's when I just read about investing and passive investing and the power of it. And that's when I made a commitment to actually doing it. And there were a lot of fumbles along the way, but thankfully it's working. And now I actually teach people how to do it.
What should you know when you're just starting out? I've always been worried, should I have a certain amount before I start investing it? Or should I just start putting money in as I go? What's the good starting point here?
This is one of the most popular questions I get, whether it's someone who's thinking about working with me or someone who just answers, ask a random question saying, I don't think I have enough to invest. And really what it comes down to is you want to think about employees talk dollars, every other facet of our occurrence with money, it's typically in dollars. When you get to wealth, it turns into percentages. When you really get into wealth building, and wealth building meaning having money grow without your direct involvement 24/7, no dollars for hours here. It's dollars for compounding. And so around wealth, it's percentage. And I'm a percentage person, just as, when you're growing up, folks say, save 10% or 20%. Well, I think if you can come to terms with a percentage of your income to try, then it doesn't matter how much that dollar is. It's just a percentage. So if I say, hey, if you're making $100 and I just want you to put 5%, meaning $5, in your head, you're going to think, wow, that's actually nothing. I can totally do $5. And then when you make $1,000 and I tell you to put $500, then you're going to think, oh, that's $500 versus me coming out the back and saying, you should do $5,000 of investments. I think that's a really horrible way to look at it, because that's almost as if you're going to treat a kindergartner with a really fancy house and just give them the keys. And when you start investing and you don't know what you're doing, you're pretty much a kindergartner. And so you want to treat it like that and say, hey, we're going to just give you a little bit of free time, see what you want to do with that and see how you do. And then as they get older, you give them more responsibility. Same thing with us and our money.
You said you ran into some bumps in the road when you first started out. What advice do you have for those who are starting to maybe avoid some of those bumps?
This is a journey to figuring out who you are and what your money can do for you as your family and really the world. And you have to have grace with yourself. So when I first started investing, it was back in 2007, 2008. And if we don't remember what happened then, we had a complete collapse of our financial system.
Mhm.
And this is when I had my tender money in the stock market. And I remember opening my accounts and seeing all red. And if you're not familiar with investing, I think anybody knows when you see red, it's just not a good thing.
Mhm.
So for me, that's what it was. And I had maybe 20 different companies and I had put, $100 in all these companies over time, $50 a month, whatever it was. And I remember, and I took a screenshot of it because I said, this will not be my forever. And I took a screenshot and everything was down. And I thought to myself, okay, what would Warren Buffett do? What would all the people who are really good at this, that has way more experience, do? I'm not going to listen to the media. I'm not going to listen to all of the other analysts out there. I'm going to listen to folks who actually have experience with this. And when I did my research, they said the market will always go up over time. And this is, of course, an asterisk because past doesn't reflect a guarantee of the future, but more things have failed us than the market. And so I thought that, and it said, buy low, sell high. And I really thought about that. And I'm a philosophy major from undergrad. And I really dissected it. And I said, well, technically this is low, isn't it? If everything's red, and this is when I should buy. So I actually doubled down on the things that I bought. And I had a reframe in thinking that this is just a sale. This is like a Macy's one-day sale. And just as excited as I get about a sale or Black Friday, I'm going to get excited about this because there are things that I couldn't afford before that I can afford to do now. And the pressure of having to get it right isn't as heavy because what I would have paid, example, at the time, maybe $200 a share for Amazon, at the time, it was probably equated to like $50 a share.
Mhm.
And so that really helped me. And that's the advice I give to anyone starting off is be graceful with yourself. Understand that this isn't a relationship that you're just trying out for a couple of weeks. If you get this right, it can change the trajectory of your financial life.
I guess, and how do you decide where to invest? I mean, you've got that research element to it, but with all these places where you could be investing, how do you decide which one is the best for you?
I do it based on proximity. And I know a lot of folks think about investing in terms of, hey, I'm going to invest in what's around me. And I think folks get confused about that because you definitely want to have an advantage. You can invest in what's around you, right? But the thing is, what's around you is around everybody too. So how is that going to give you an added advantage? On one hand, you can think about, where do I have a little extra insight that no one else has? If I go into a room, if I were to pick the top 20 people in the room, what subject matter would I definitely be in the top 20 in that room? So if you are an activist and you're in a room full of people and the conversation comes up about policy, you'll probably be in the top 20% of that room. If you are in life sciences and the topic comes up about science, natural science, biotech, whatever it is, you'll probably be in the top 20% of that room. Once you figure out what that little superpower of yours is, that insight, well, now you can look at companies that are in your sphere of influence and start actually thinking about, could this be a good investment for me? And that's better than, say, investing in everything around you. Not that that's not a horrible strategy, but this is going to give you a little bit of an upper advantage.
Where are you investing right now?
I'm investing in a whole lot of things. So I use my money as play to show other people that they can exist happily as an investor and not pretty much die. Because a lot of people, they feel like they're going to die when they think about money and investing, especially women. It's just something that for a lot of us, it's something that we feel powerless in. And if you typically walk in the world feeling quite powerful, it's never convenient to feel powerless. So it's something that's like, I don't want to deal with it. So my goal as the Happy Investor and at the Happy Investor Method, it's really to show people that this is really fun and engaging. So things that I've invested in, in the stock market, I have invested in things like Adobe when I was working as a recruiter at a web design firm, because everyone we recruited needed to know Adobe. I recently invested in a hotel conglomerate block, right? Because I didn't want to invest in one specific hotel. And it's really interesting that as a result of being a hotel investor in that regard, investing in a fund that reflects hotels, I actually am an owner of hotels. And so that's the beautiful thing about it, because a lot of people don't think that they can own a hotel. And I never thought that. But if I didn't start baby steps with the stock market, I wouldn't have had the courage to believe that I can actually be an investor at that scale. So those are some of the things. I look at investing in companies that are doing great things in the world that I really want to support and make sure they survive. So when you think about investing, I think a lot of times we don't realize it's a relationship that's very mutual. You're giving your money to a company so that they can use your money and it can grow and give you back money, but they're also using that money so that they can grow and stick around longer. And they need that money to hire people. They need that money to be competitive in the market. So when I look at a group of companies, I look at ones that are amazing, that, also can support the environment, whether it's electric cars, anything like that. And I'll put my money towards that because that's a nod to the universe, or to even just the economics of things, that I want this company to survive. So that's how I do a little bit of my investing.
Now, one of the things that, I've always just kind of been thinking about, because I want to start getting more into investing and start doing more with my money. But I worry about, there's been a lot of talk over the past year and a half now about whether we're heading towards a recession, and how that might impact things. From your outlook and stuff like that, should I be worried on that front? Should I wait until, I guess, maybe things hit and then I can buy low, or should I just hop into it now?
I'm always a fan of just put a toe in the water. You're not going to drown with a toe in the water. And if this is something that's supposed to be around for the rest of your lifetime, then it really doesn't matter if there's going to be a recession later or if the market's going to go down, because the reality is, over the past 5 years, the S&P 500 alone, which is a category of the top 500 performing companies, the S&P 500 has grown 58% in 5 years. So that's, for every dollar you put in, you're making 58 cents. Let's think about, say, even over the lifetime of it, it's gone up 922%. And so when you think about the market over time, it goes up. This is kind of statistically, it has always gone up over time when you look at the entire life cycle of it. So when you know that it's always going to go up, the reality is, if you wait until after a potential recession, then things are going to be more expensive and you would have missed out on potential sales. And also, when things get cheaper, you don't want to spend time trying to figure it out when everything is down, because it's almost going to be as if you're in a washing machine. You won't know what's up, what's down. But if you start right away to start building the muscle, when you need to flex the muscle, you already got it.
Are there ways to invest, I guess, outside the stock market?
Absolutely. So you can invest with real estate, which is something that I love also investing in. I have something called a wealth stack. And in the beginning, it's the stock market, because we're all in it, whether we want to be or not, with our 401ks and retirement and pensions, as well as school funds for our kids. We're in the system. Whether you want to realize it or not, you're in the market. It's just what side you're playing on. And then what I also like to do is, once you have that established, then why not add on real estate? And you don't have to get in actively where you're buying and flipping houses and you have tenants. My way for real estate is through something actually called a syndication. And that's where you pool money with investors, and there's a lead investor who does all the work, and they have good problems where they have great insight on a potential real estate deal. They have access to it, but they don't have the financing and the money. And there's a good problem that a lot of us have too, where we actually have a little bit of disposable income, but there's no way we're doing all the work to figure it out. So I think when you collaborate with others, especially when it comes to investing, a lot more can be done. And then lastly, the other way that I also like to invest is directly in companies as an angel investor. And some people think that you have to be this multimillionaire to be an angel investor. But as an entrepreneur, I can tell you that for some entrepreneurs, having just, $5,000 and them giving you a percentage ownership in their company, that $5,000 can be a make or break for them. And so it can start off that small. You can pull together a couple of friends and do it and invest in actual companies. So those are many different ways that you can get in on investing if you don't want to do the stock market. Of course, I love starting at the stock market because there's no minimums, there's no credit check. It's really neutral.
Now, I know that like some of what I've heard from doing past interviews and stuff like that is like if you're trying to save for like retirement or a particular goal and you're trying to invest in order to build your funds for that way, it's like, when you're younger, you'd be a little bit more adventurous maybe. And then as you're older, maybe your investments get a little bit more stable and dependable in that sense. Do you agree with that? If you're maybe more getting towards retirement age, how should you be approaching your investing?
So Jesse, it's really interesting because the happy investor method is really like take the conventional way of things and just flip it on its head. Mm-hmm. And I'm really happy that people are listening to hear another point of view. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I didn't have the luxury of investing, in my early 20s and in all of that because I had a lot of baggage. I had a lot of financial baggage. There's financial trauma that came into play as well. And so I'm not that person. And I think when people hear things like that if you started earlier, you'd be here now. But the reality is I'm starting now. So are you saying that I shouldn't start because I'm not there? And that's not it at all. So when I think if you're in this position where you have a bit of catching up to do, or at least perceived catch up, the worst thing you want to do is have the most conservative strategy, because it's almost like, this is really going to do nothing for me. And I'll give you a quick example and a quick story. I remember when I was in my early 20s and I was fresh out of college, I didn't have a job and my savings were dwindling. And I was pretty much down to my last $200. And I know someone's going to hear this and get super cringy and think you're crazy, but hear me out. Last $200. And I thought really and truly, this $200 is not going to make or break the quality of my future, because I need way more than this. I need a salary. And this $200 isn't going to help me get that, really. And so why am I trying to just scrunch and budget this little $200? We got bigger fish to fry here. So what I decided to do with my $200 was host a lobster party at my house. And I was like, you know what? If we're going down, we're going to enjoy it. And I say this, and what I did was I invited all these people that I love to come. I went to Restaurant Depot, got lobsters for like $10 each, where restaurants go. And I just made it happen. And I focused on the good time with people. And I thought, this is all I have. I'm going to share it. And what that did was it invigorated me to do more. It invigorated me to think of what would happen in the future if I can actually make it big, where I can have this be a party where I'm not the one cooking and serving and we can all have a good time. And because I experienced that, it pushed me in further. So this is how it translates to investing and the strategy of being conservative with your investments when you're closer to retirement. I want folks to have a quick win. And if you're going to put your investments in a fund that's really conservative, like maybe earning 3%, which is very common as you start getting closer to retirement, they're going to tell you you should be investing in bonds. It's too risky to do stocks. So your strategy is going to be like 80% bonds, 20% stocks. And at that case, you're going to start doing it and you're going to see like, I put in about 20,000 and I'm really making just, I don't know, $1,000 on that to $2,000, and you've been doing it for 5 years. Mm-hmm. That is not going to help you to support the rest of your life. But if you had just put that in example, Apple, well, that 20,000 in 5 years would have grown to about 80,000. Now that's a huge deal. And don't throw everything into the risky thing. I'm not saying that also. Don't take your whole life savings and just throw it into the stock market or a risky investment. But what I'm saying is, because you have catching up to do, you get to take on a bit more risk because the reward needs to be bigger for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess let's talk a little bit about why this is so important, particularly for women, to be on board with investing and to start building sort of that financial independence.
I think it's really important because as women, we tend to put ourselves on the back burner, just as most folks are caregivers. And the reality of a woman, especially if she has parents, then she might be the one in her family to have to figure out taking care of her parents. And if she has kids, she's also the one in the family to figure out taking care of kids. Now, I am a mother of two. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I really am so thankful for my financial situation, and I never take it lightly, because if I had just one more kid, 3 kids, paying for daycare wouldn't make sense, because daycare is actually the cost of a mortgage. And typically the women in the family pay the daycare. It's like, if you're working, then your salary goes towards paying for childcare. And having money and investments in the background that can pay for it. Or when you're stepping away to take care of your kids or your responsibilities, whether it be parents or you want to take a vacation or quit your job, that actually gives you more of the resolve and safety net to do it. And so when I think about for women and our permission-based society, when it comes to all the things that we have to ask permission for to just exist, I can't really see a way of me being fully expressed without being financially independent. And, I'm currently writing an op-ed piece on divorce and how women can protect themselves. And in it, I tell them that having an understanding of our household finances, I do the investing in my family. I do the investing. My husband actually does the budgeting stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you do that. But when we think about divorce specifically, the reality is 50% of marriages break up. You have 6 friends, 3 y'all getting divorced. You don't know which 3 it is, and you never hope for it. And if you have a daughter or a sister or a mother, chances are one of them are going to get divorced too. So it's important to have the understanding of what happens. Oftentimes, women would concede and keep the house in the divorce and let go of the investments because they don't understand it. They're like, I don't want to deal with it. Meanwhile, the investments were making way more money than, say, the house value. And it's easier to liquidate, say, stock investments versus real estate. Oftentimes, women, when they think about their 401k, they'll divest their 401k because they don't understand the future value of it, whether it's a divorce or a separation. And so these are things that we as women get to be savvy on, and not just because we want to welcome, bad juju into our relationship, but really and truly, we don't know who we're going to have this information for. And it makes me more present in my relationship, knowing that I'm not there because of finances, but I'm there because of a choice.
Before we go, I thought we'd bring you the story of one philanthropist whose investment has had a great impact on New York City and New York's Hudson Valley. Joan K. Davidson died earlier this month at the age of 96 in Hudson. Her son, John Matthew Davidson, told the New York Times that simply, quote, her heart gave out after a life of public and philanthropic service. That service included stints as staffer for then Senate Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson in the 1950s, as the chair of the New York State Council on the Arts in the 1970s, and as the commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation in the 1990s. She's perhaps best known, though, for her work running the J.M. Kaplan Fund, taking over her father's organization from 1977 to 1993 and overseeing its support for critical New York City projects like West Beth Artists Housing, Green Markets, South Street Seaport, and the renovation of Gracie Mansion. A lot of that work she continued as President Emeritus, advocating for environmental, conservation, and social justice causes in New York City and upstate, particularly in the Adirondacks and New York's Hudson Valley, where Davidson spent a considerable amount of time at her Germantown estate, Midwood. Peter Payton, former head of the Columbia Land Conservancy, says Davidson was a fierce advocate for environmental causes in the region. In addition to serving on the boards of organizations like the Natural Resources Defense Council, she was one of the earliest trustees of the Columbia Land Conservancy when it launched in the 1980s.
She was an early board member at a time when not only was the Columbia Land Conservancy a new organization, but, the whole notion of local land trusts was still a kind of a new idea at that time. And I think a lot of people didn't necessarily appreciate the potential such organizations have for, a really significant impact in conservation and communities. And Joan did, and she was a consistent and generous and enthusiastic supporter, throughout.
In 1995, Davidson turned her focus to books and founded the fund's publishing grants arm Furthermore in Hudson. Program director Ann Berkmeyer has worked alongside Davidson at Furthermore for 25 years. She says the program helped publish more than 1,400 nonfiction books to date, granting over $8 million to nonprofits across the U.S., Canada, and Europe.
Joan just absolutely loved books. She loved the way they looked. She loved the way they smelled. She loved the way they felt when you held them in your hands, the way they provoked thought, expanded knowledge. She considered them contributions without which we would be the poorer.
In 2013, Davidson launched Furthermore's Alice Award, a larger $25,000 prize awarded annually to an illustrated work chosen by a jury of panelists. By the end of the year, Berkmeyer estimates Furthermore will have given $385,000 in Alice Award grants to first-place recipients and honorable mentions. Elena Cianco, executive director of the performing arts theater PS21 in Chatham, was not only a close friend of Davidson, but a tenant at Midwood. The pair met through Davidson's work with Furthermore, and for years the two swapped stories and artistic debates almost every other day. Cianco says Davidson was cultured in the true original sense of the word. She had a profound, authentic interest in all kinds of subjects, from art and science to politics.
It wasn't a put-on, where somebody has money and they begin collecting art, let's say. She was very much of that old regime and that incredible spirit of the past, that boundless curiosity and openness.
While Davidson dealt mostly in small grants and investments, she was very much what Cianco calls a hands-on investor. She would often meet grantees in person to discuss their needs, concerns, and goals. She says Davidson not only stepped up when PS21 suddenly found itself short of funding in 2019, following the death of its founder, but she also provided similar grants to keep various Columbia County organizations afloat during the pandemic.
J.M. Kaplan Fund and her way of giving was the most unbureaucratic, the most direct, the easiest application you could ever imagine. And I think that effect, if you think about what effect she had on local scene, was extremely powerful.
Other grant recipients from Davidson and the J.M. Kaplan Fund over the years include Adirondack Experience, Adirondack Wild, Hudson Hall, Scenic Hudson, Historic Hudson, the Fisher Center at Bard College, the Thomas Cole Historic House, the Shaker Museum and Library, the Columbia Land Conservancy, and yes, even WAMC. In a statement, the station called Davidson a true friend who helped keep its mission alive for many years. J. DiLorenzo, executive director of the Preservation League of New York State, says Davidson served the organization for decades, both as a trustee and as a patron. He says she was instrumental in some of the league's core programs, including its technical assistance program for residents and municipalities looking to learn how to preserve historic structures in their downtowns.
She hired a consultant to design the program, and she actually, through the Kaplan Fund, provided the grant funding that established the program and paid the first director for it. And that technical assistance program is still a core program of the Preservation League to this day.
In addition to providing grants during the pandemic, Cianco says Davidson also never stopped hosting events at her carriage house at Midwood, even if they had to be held 12 feet apart. Last summer, Davidson launched an extensive series of Midwood events encouraging attendees to, quote, listen, see, think, agree, disagree, and have fun, end quote. Pamela Herrick, director of the Ulster County Historical Society, worked closely with Davidson to curate the 15 events, from art exhibits to public speakers.
For me, as a woman in mid-career, it was very interesting to work with a woman who had such a substantial public life and who was also very much the center of the orbit of her very large family. I found that very inspiring.
If all of this seems like a lot, that's because it is. Cianco says Davidson's death came as a surprise to her family and friends because even at age 96, she never slowed down. The Sunday before Davidson died, Cianco says she joined her for lunch with former Congressman Carolyn Maloney, talking political strategy after the fall of Roe v. Wade last year.
Then the following Tuesday, she had another big dinner. The next day, she had another dinner with her son and his daughter. And then on Friday, when she died, she was supposed to have yet another event, and then on Saturday, she was supposed to have this carriage house Midwood conversation. So it's as if she walked out of a party,
Cianco says Davidson was a frequent host of Democratic Party fundraisers and candidates over the years, supporting candidates including New York Governor Kathy Hochul, now Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, Congressman Pat Ryan, and State Senator Michelle Hinchey. In a statement, Democratic State Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett of the 106th District called Davidson a, quote, beloved friend, adding, quote, I will always picture Joan at Midwood surrounded by family and friends, orchestrating multiple conversations about arts and politics, end quote. In his own statement, Congressman Mark Molinaro, a Republican from the 19th District, remembered working with Davidson to designate the Hudson as New York's first heritage river, as well as several other waterfront and preservation projects. Davidson is survived by her 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren, and many, many friends. Every year, Furthermore hosts a ceremony for the recipient of the Alice Award. This year, Berkmeyer says the next generation of the Kaplan family will be there to celebrate and represent Davidson. In the meantime, the J.M. Kaplan Fund has put together a page on its website where colleagues and loved ones can post their remembrances.
Jesse, I just want to say they don't make them like Joan often. And I feel so grateful to have known her.
Thanks for listening to this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcasts.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And to stay in the loop on all of WAMC's shows, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King for 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. The night air down the hall